The night was cold and the wind moved through the empty streets. A small café stood on the corner, lights warm against the dark city. Inside, a man sat alone, his hands around a simple cup of coffee. His name was Daniel, and he lived a life. Without much change, work, home, sleep, repeat. Every day was the same, but this night was different, though he did not know it yet. The café door opened and a woman walked in. She looked lost, almost nervous, her steps unsure. Her clothes were strange, not old, but not from this world either. She stood in line, searching her pockets. Her hands trembled as if she had never done this before. When her turn came, she whispered to the barista, asking for a hot drink. The barista told her the price and the woman froze. She pulled out a handful of coins and papers, none of which made sense. The people in line grew impatient. Sighing, shaking their heads, the woman's eyes lowered and she whispered in a broken accent, I do not have enough. Daniel watched from his table, his heart moving before his mind. He stood, walked to the counter, and placed a bill on the counter. Put it on me, he said, his voice calm. The woman looked at him, her eyes wide, glowing, faintly as the cafe light touched them. Why would you do this? She asked softly. Daniel only smiled. Because it looks like you need help. The barista shrugged, took the money, and gave her the drink. The woman held the cup as if it were more than just warmth. She whispered a thank you, her voice shaking. Then she walked to a corner table, sitting alone, staring at the steam. Daniel returned to his seat, but his mind was restless. He told himself it was nothing, just kindness. But his eyes kept drifting back to her. Something about her was wrong, or maybe too perfect. Her skin seemed smooth, almost shining. Her hair had strands that shimmered like silver under the cafe. Lights, and her eyes, when she glanced at him, were not the eyes of a normal person. They were deeper, brighter, as if they carried stars within them. Minutes passed in silence. She sipped her drink slowly, as if learning how to hold the cup. Once, the steam rose and made her flinch, as though she had never seen such a thing before. Daniel frowned, his curiosity growing stronger. She was not from here, not from this city, maybe not even from this planet, but he kept quiet, not wanting to frighten her. At last, she stood, moving toward the door. As she passed Daniel's table, she stopped. Her eyes met his, and for a moment he felt a weight in his chest, like she was searching inside him. Then she leaned closer and whispered, kindness. Rare, Daniel. He froze. He had never told her his name. Before he could speak, she walked out into the night, leaving the cafe behind. Daniel sat frozen in his chair, his coffee forgotten. How did she know his name? Why did her voice carry both, sadness and hope? He looked out the window, trying to see her in the street. But the night had swallowed her. Only the echo of her words remained, and in his chest, a question grew heavier. Who was she, really? The city outside was the same, but Daniel's world had already changed. One small act of kindness had opened a door, and behind that door waited secrets he could not imagine. He did not know that his simple choice to pay for a stranger's drink would soon pull him into a story larger than his own life. He did not know that this woman was no ordinary traveler. She carried with her the power of galaxies. She carried with her a need so desperate it would shake his future. But for now, all Daniel knew was the chill of the night, the warmth of his coffee, and the memory of glowing eyes whispering his name. And somewhere, in the shadows of the city, the woman stood watching him, her hand holding the hot drink, her heart trembling. She whispered to herself in her own language, words no human could understand. Yet if Daniel had heard them, he would know their meaning. They said humans were cruel, but this one might save me. The night moved on, the city unaware, but fate had already begun its quiet work. 2 lives had touched, and the universe would never be the same. The next day felt long and heavy for Daniel. Work passed in a blur, his mind not on the tasks before him. Every time he tried to focus, he saw her face again, the strange woman with shining eyes. Her whisper of his name still echoed in his mind. How had she known him when he had never spoken to her before? He told himself it was nothing. Maybe he misheard, maybe she guessed. But deep inside, he knew the truth was stranger. That night he walked home through the same streets. The café. Lights were off now, the door locked, chairs stacked. The city was quieter than usual, the air colder. Daniel pulled his jacket close, telling himself he was just tired. But then from the corner of his eye he saw her. The same woman standing under a broken streetlight. Her hair caught the faint glow, silver strands shimmering in the dark. He froze, unsure if he should approach. But she stepped forward, her voice low and soft. "You helped me," she said. "But you must be careful now." Daniel frowned. Careful of what? Her eyes flickered, glowing faintly as though lit from within. "Of me, and of them," she whispered, looking over her shoulder. Daniel's heart raced. "Who are you?" The woman hesitated, her lips trembling. For a moment her image blurred, like smoke bending in the wind. And then he saw it, a flash beneath the disguise. Her skin shimmered pale blue, her cheekbones sharp, her pupils narrow like a cat's. It was only for a second, but it was enough. Daniel stepped back, his breath caught in his throat. "You're not human," he whispered. She closed her eyes, sighing as though tired of hiding. "No, I am not," she said, her accent thicker now. "I come from far away. Too far for you to imagine." Daniel shook his head, trying to laugh, trying to deny it, but the look in her eyes stopped him. There was no lie in them. "What do you want from me?" he asked. Her hands shook as she held the paper cup still half full of the drink he bought for her. "Nothing," she said softly. "I only needed warmth and kindness." Daniel studied her, torn between fear and curiosity. "You said I must be careful of them. Who are they?" Her eyes darted to the shadows of the alley. "Hunters," she said, her voice dropping lower. "They know what I am. They want what I carry." Daniel's chest tightened. "And what is that?" She looked at him as though weighing a choice, but then her head snapped to the side, hearing something he could not. The street around them was silent, but her body tensed like a cornered animal. Suddenly, she grabbed his wrist, pulling him into the dark alley. "Wait, what are you doing?" Daniel whispered. "Quiet," she hissed. "They are close." Her grip was strong, far stronger than her thin frame should allow. Daniel felt his pulse race, panic rising. But then he heard it too. Footsteps, heavy and slow, moving at the far end of the street. Not one set, but many. Figures in dark coats appeared, their faces hidden, their movement too smooth. They searched the street with strange devices glowing faint green. Daniel pressed against the wall, his breath shallow. "Who are they?" he asked again, barely a whisper. The woman's eyes narrowed. Not human either. The figures passed, their devices humming. One paused, turning toward the alley. Daniel's heart stopped, but the woman raised her hand. A faint shimmer spread in the air, like glass bending. The figure scanned the alley, then moved on. Only when they were gone did she release the shimmer, her shoulders dropping. Daniel stared at her, unable to believe what he had seen. "You can hide us?" She nodded weakly, "For a short time, but they will return." Daniel pulled away, his fear stronger than his questions. "This is insane. You're telling me aliens are real and they're hunting you? Why me? Why show me this?" Her voice cracked, soft and desperate. "Because you showed me kindness when no one else would." Daniel froze, the weight of her words pressing on him. She stepped closer, her glowing eyes locking with his. "I know you don't trust me, but if you don't help they will kill me and maybe you too." He wanted to walk away, to forget this night, but something in her voice held him there. It was not only fear, it was sorrow. A sorrow deeper than any human should carry. Daniel looked at her, and for the first time he noticed the way she trembled, not from cold but from being alone, hunted, desperate. "What's your name?" he asked quietly. She hesitated as though the word itself was dangerous. My name is Soraya, she whispered. The sound was strange yet beautiful, echoing in his chest. Before Daniel could reply, a sharp noise rang through the street. A metallic crack. The shadows moved and one of the hunters returned, its device glowing bright red. Soraya's eyes widened. They found us, she hissed. She pulled Daniel's hand again, her voice urgent. Run! The night was alive with fear as Daniel and Soraya ran through the narrow streets. The hunters moved behind them, their strange devices glowing red in the dark. Daniel's breath burned in his chest, his legs heavy, but Soraya pulled him with surprising strength. She moved like someone who had done this 1,000 times before. They darted through an alley, down broken steps, into a basement door left unlocked. Only when the sounds faded did Soraya release his hand, her chest rising, and falling fast. Daniel leaned against the wall, gasping. What are they? He asked. Soraya's eyes glowed faintly in the dim light, her silver hair loose around her shoulders. They are collectors, she said, voice low. They steal lives, secrets, power, anything they can sell. Daniel swallowed hard. And they want you. She nodded, her eyes filled with shadows. They have been chasing me for weeks. For a moment, silence filled the room, broken only by Daniel's harsh breathing. Then he asked the question that burned in him since the cafe. Who are you really, Soraya? She looked at him as though the weight of the universe rested on that answer. Finally she spoke, her voice trembling. I am not only from another world, I am heir to one of the largest fortunes in the galaxy. Daniel blinked, sure he had heard wrong. A fortune? You mean money? Soraya's lips curved in a bitter smile. More than money. Entire planets, fleets of ships, resources beyond what this world can dream. Daniel stared at her, half laughing, half terrified. You're telling me? You're some kind of alien billionaire? Soraya lowered her gaze, her voice breaking. I was born to inherit an empire, but enemies wait to see me fail. Her hand tightened on the paper cup she still carried, cold now but held like a treasure. I came to this world because I needed to hide, and because I needed something I could not find among my own people. Daniel's head spun. He wanted to walk away, to tell himself she was mad, but he remembered the shimmer of her skin, the glow in her eyes, the hunters with their machines. It was too real to deny. Why me? He asked suddenly, his voice sharp. Why tell me all this? Soraya lifted her eyes and he felt their weight. Because when you gave me kindness, you changed everything, she whispered. No one has given me that in years. Not on my world, not among my people, not among the hunters. Only you. Daniel shifted uncomfortably, not knowing what to say. He had bought a stranger a drink. Nothing more, nothing less. And now she spoke as if that small act had saved her soul. Soraya moved closer, her voice urgent now. You must understand, Daniel. My life is not safe. But it is not only my life. It is my empire, my people, my entire legacy. Daniel frowned, the word legacy heavy in his mind. You said they want you dead because of your fortune? Soraya nodded. If I fail to protect my right, they will take everything and my people will suffer. Daniel rubbed his forehead, frustration burning in him. This is insane. I'm just a man. I don't have power. I don't have weapons. I don't have answers. Soraya's hand touched his arm, soft but firm. You have something far greater, she said. He looked at her, confused. Human will, she whispered. The galaxy knows your kind. It fears and admires you because you survive when no one else can. Her words struck him deep, though he did not want to admit it. Daniel had lived a quiet life, ordinary, unimportant. But in her eyes, he saw something more. Before he could speak, the sound of heavy boots echoed outside. The hunters were near. Again, searching. Soraya's eyes widened, her body tense. They found us, she whispered. Daniel cursed under his breath. How do we stop them? Soraya's hand moved, pulling a small device from her pocket. It looked like nothing Daniel had ever seen, glowing with strange symbols. She pressed it against the wall, and with a shimmer the stone opened like liquid, revealing a hidden tunnel. Daniel's jaw dropped, but Soraya grabbed his hand again. "There is no time," she said, pulling him inside. The wall sealed behind them, leaving only darkness lit by the faint glow of the device. As they moved deeper, Daniel asked, "Where does this go?" Soraya's voice echoed softly. "To my ship." Daniel nearly tripped. "You have a ship?" Soraya nodded, her silver hair glowing in the dim light. "It is hidden, but it is not safe for long." The tunnel twisted downward, leading to a vast chamber. There, covered in shadows, rested a sleek vessel unlike anything Daniel had ever imagined. Its surface shimmered like water, alive with soft pulses of light, even in the dark. It felt powerful, ancient, and beautiful. Soraya's eyes softened as she looked at it. "This is the last gift of my family," she whispered. Daniel stared, unable to speak. All his doubts melted away. She was telling the truth. Every word of it. But before he could ask more, a loud crash echoed from above. The hunters had found the tunnel, their devices breaking through. Soraya turned to Daniel, her voice sharp. "If they take me, the galaxy will burn." Daniel's chest tightened, fear and anger mixing. "What do you want me to do?" he asked. Soraya's glowing eyes met his, filled with desperation. "Help me fight, or help me escape," she whispered, "because I cannot do this alone." The hidden chamber shook as the hunters broke through the upper tunnels. Dust fell from the ceiling. Lights on the strange ship flickered awake. Daniel stood frozen, staring at the glowing vessel, but Soraya's hand pulled him forward. "There is no time," she said, urgency burning in her voice. "They will tear this place apart." The ramp of the ship lowered with a soft hum. Daniel hesitated, his body screaming to run the other way, but Soraya's grip was strong, and her eyes carried both fear and trust. Against his better judgment, he followed her inside. The air inside the ship felt warmer, alive, like stepping into another world. The walls pulsed with soft light. Strange symbols moved like water across the panels. Daniel could only whisper, This is impossible." Soraya gave no answer, only moved to the controls. Her hands danced across glowing symbols, the ship humming louder in response. The floor shook violently as the hunters' machines reached the chamber. A deafening crash echoed outside. Daniel grabbed the edge of a seat, his heart pounding. "What do we do now?" he shouted. Soraya's eyes glowed brighter, her voice steady despite the chaos. "We escape." The ship roared to life, lifting from the chamber floor. Stone cracked beneath it, dust and rocks swirling in the air. With a blast of energy, the vessel tore upward. Smashing through soil and concrete, Daniel held on as the world above shattered. And then suddenly, they were in the night sky, rising fast. The city lights shrank below them, the stars stretched overhead. Daniel's breath caught. He had never seen the world from this height, not like this. The hunters' vehicles tried to follow, but Soraya's ship was faster, disappearing into the clouds. For a long moment, silence filled the cabin. Daniel slumped into a chair, shaking, his mind spinning. "What just happened?" he muttered. Soraya turned from the controls, her silver hair glowing in the ship's light. "You saved me, and now I must tell you the truth." Daniel looked at her, frustration and fear boiling inside. "I didn't save you. You dragged me into this," he snapped. Soraya's eyes softened, but her words were sharp. "You could have walked away that night in the cafe, but you didn't. You chose kindness, and that choice has bound you to me." Daniel shook his head. "Bound me? What are you talking about?" Soraya stepped closer, her voice trembling with something deeper now. "My people live by law written in blood and empire," she said. "If I am to keep my throne, if I am to hold my fortune, I must have an heir." Daniel blinked, stunned into silence. "You mean a child?" he asked slowly. Soraya nodded, her glowing eyes never leaving his. Yes, but not with my own kind. Daniel stood, his heart racing. You can't be serious. Soraya's voice broke, filled with desperation. I am serious, Daniel. My bloodline is at war. My rivals are waiting for me to fail. If I do not produce an heir, they will strip me of everything. My empire will be torn apart. Her hands shook as she reached for him. Your species is rare among the stars. Strong, adaptable, feared even. If my heir carries human blood, no one will dare challenge them. Daniel stepped back, anger and disbelief crashing through him. You brought me here. For this? You want me to be your answer? Soraya's eyes glistened, her voice almost breaking. I wanted to tell you sooner, but I had to know if you were the one. Your kindness proved it, Daniel. You are not like the others. You saw me as more than a stranger, more than a monster. Daniel laughed bitterly, his hands shaking. This is insane. I'm not a savior. I'm not a warrior. I'm just a man who paid for a coffee. Soraya stepped closer, her presence overwhelming. You are more than you know, she whispered. My empire has billions of souls, and all of them will fall into darkness if I fail. I cannot do this alone, Daniel. I need you. The ship hummed softly. Drifting above the clouds, Daniel turned away, staring at the stars beyond the glass. The idea was too big, too unreal. Him, a man with no purpose, no future, now asked to decide the fate of an empire. He clenched his fists, anger mixing with fear. Why me? He asked again, voice low. Soraya's answer was simple, her voice a whisper of truth. Because you were kind when you had no reason to be. Before Daniel could reply, alarms screamed through the ship, red light flashed across the cabin. Soraya's eyes widened, her hands flying to the controls. They found us, she hissed. Through the window, Daniel saw dark shapes rising in the sky, hunters in pursuit. And their ships glowing with deadly light. Soraya's voice hardened. We can fight or we can run, but either way, Daniel, you must choose. Because from this moment on, your life is no longer your own. The ship shook as alarms blared through the cabin. Red lights flashed across the walls, and Daniel's stomach twisted with fear. Outside the windows, dark hunter ships rose through the clouds, glowing like predators in the night sky. Their engines burned red, their weapons locked. On Soraya's vessel, Daniel gripped the edge of his seat, his voice cracking. What do we do? Soraya's fingers flew across glowing controls, symbols shifting like rivers of light. Her eyes narrowed, glowing brighter than ever. We can fight or we can flee, she said, her voice hard but trembling beneath. If we fight, there is no turning back. If we flee, they will only return stronger. Daniel's chest tightened, the weight of her words pressing heavy. He was no soldier, no hero, just a man caught in a nightmare he did not choose. But now she was asking him to decide the path. A hunter ship fired. A beam of searing energy ripped past them, shaking the cabin. Panels flickered, sparks danced across the floor. Daniel ducked, heart pounding. Are we even strong enough to fight them? He shouted. Soraya's jaw tightened. This ship is old but powerful, but I cannot pilot and defend at once. Her eyes cut to him, desperate. I need your hands, Daniel. Your courage, your choice. Daniel's mind screamed, no. He wanted to say he couldn't, that this wasn't his fight. But the sight of her trembling hands, the weight of fear in her glowing eyes froze the words in his throat. He thought back to the café, the way she looked lost and alone, the way one small kindness had lit a spark in her. Now that spark had grown, and she was asking him to keep it alive. Daniel swallowed hard, his voice shaking. Tell me what to do. Soraya's breath caught, her expression softening for just a moment. Then you have chosen, she whispered. She pulled him to the co-pilot seat, her hands guiding his. Symbols glowed under his touch, the ship humming in response. Follow my lead, she said, her voice steady now. Her hands flew across the panel, shifting the ship as beams of deadly energy tore past them. Hold this, she commanded, Guiding his hand to a lever, Daniel clenched it tight, feeling the ship respond to his strength. Another hunter ship fired, and Soraya twisted, the vessel sharply, the beam missing them by inches. Daniel's stomach lurched, but he held on. Now, she shouted, pointing at a panel. Daniel slammed his hand against it, and the ship roared, firing a pulse of blinding light. The energy struck one of the hunters, tearing through its hull. It exploded in a burst of flame, scattering pieces across the sky. Daniel gasped, his heart racing. I did that? Soraya's lips curved in the faintest smile. Yes, you did. But there was no time to celebrate. 2 more hunters closed in, their weapons charging. Soraya shouted orders, and Daniel obeyed. Together they moved as one, dodging blasts, firing back, the ship dancing through the storm. Daniel's fear did not fade, but beneath it burned something else. Adrenaline, fire, the will to survive. For the first time he felt alive. Not as a man behind a desk, not as a stranger lost in routine, but as someone who mattered, someone fighting for more than himself. The hunters circled them, driving them upward into thinner air. Daniel coughed, gripping the controls. We can't keep this up, he shouted. Soraya's eyes burned with determination. We don't need to, she said. Her fingers tapped a sequence, the ship humming deeper. Brace yourself, she warned. The vessel roared, light exploded around them, and in an instant the stars stretched into long lines. Daniel felt his body pressed back into the seat, his breath torn away. Then, silence. The hunters were gone, lost behind them. The ship floated in the quiet of space, the earth a blue jewel. Far below, Daniel stared out the window, his breath shaking. Space, he whispered. He had seen it in pictures and movies, but never like this. Soraya looked at him, her eyes softer now. You chose to fight, Daniel, and you saved us both. Daniel shook his head, still trembling. I didn't save anyone, I just followed your orders. Soraya leaned closer, her voice firm. You made the choice, that is what matters. For a moment, silence settled between them. Daniel turned to her, frustration mixing with awe. Why me? Out of everyone on this planet, why me? Soraya's face hardened, sorrow in her eyes. Because my people would never stand beside me. Because my enemies circle like wolves. Because the only way to protect my throne is to give it to someone who will not betray me. She paused, her voice dropping. And because I need an heir. A human heir, strong enough to silence every rival. Daniel's stomach twisted, the words heavy. He wanted to argue, to say he couldn't be that man. But before he could speak, alarms flared again. Soraya's face drained of color. No, she whispered. It's too soon. Through the window, shadows appeared. Massive shapes larger than the hunters, their weapons glowing brighter than suns. Soraya's voice trembled. These are not collectors. These are warships. Daniel's heart pounded. If those were hunters, then what are these? Soraya's answer was a whisper of dread. The ones who want my empire most. The silence of space shattered as the warships closed in. They were massive, their black hulls covered with glowing lines of red. Each one was the size of a city. Armed with weapons strong enough to tear moons apart, Daniel's heart pounded, his breath shallow. How do we fight that? He whispered. Soraya's eyes glowed with both fear and resolve. We don't fight all of them, she said, her voice sharp. We outsmart them. The ship vibrated as scanners swept over them, beams of light searching through the void. Panels around Daniel flickered, showing symbols he could not understand. Soraya moved quickly, her hands flying across the glowing controls. They want me alive, she explained. They will not destroy us yet. They will try to capture. Daniel swallowed hard. And what happens if they succeed? Soraya's face darkened. Then my bloodline ends and the galaxy burns. A deep hum filled the ship, the warships powering their tractor beams. Blue light reached out like claws, pulling Soraya's vessel closer. Daniel gripped the edge of his seat, his voice breaking. We're caught. Soraya's eyes flashed, her voice firm. Not yet. She tapped a sequence on the controls. and the ship shuddered, its hull glowing bright silver. Suddenly, the tractor beams bent and twisted. Unable to lock fully, Daniel gasped. "What did you do?" Soraya's lips curved faintly. "I changed the ship's frequency. For a moment, we are smoke in their hands." But the moment passed quickly. The beams adjusted, pulling harder. Alarms screamed across the cabin, the ship shaking violently. Daniel held tight, fear clawing at him. "We can't hold out." Soraya's voice cut through the chaos. "Then we strike first." She opened a panel before Daniel, symbols glowing bright. "Here," she said. "This controls the ship's weapons. I will handle the shields. You fire." Daniel froze, staring at the alien panel. "Me? I don't know how to use this." Soraya's glowing eyes locked on him. "You learn fast and you have no choice." The warships closed in, their weapons charging. Daniel's hands shook as he touched the panel. But the ship responded. Symbols shifted into simple patterns. As if adapting to him, targets appeared. Glowing marks across the enemy ships. "Choose," Soraya commanded. Daniel clenched his jaw, pressing one of the marks. The ship roared, energy surging forward. A beam of silver light shot from the hull, striking a warship's engines. The giant vessel trembled, flames bursting across its side. Daniel gasped. "I hit it." Soraya's voice sharpened. "Again!" Daniel struck another target, then another. The ship fired. Explosions lit the void. But for every shot he landed, more enemies surrounded them. Energy blasts slammed into Soraya's shields, shaking the vessel. Sparks flew across the cabin, smoke filled the air. Soraya gritted her teeth, sweat on her brow. "Shields failing," she warned. Daniel's chest tightened. "We can't win this." Soraya turned to him, her voice fierce. "Winning is not the goal, survival is." Her hands flew across the controls, the ship diving suddenly, slipping between the warships like a fish in deep water. Daniel fired again, the beam cutting through another enemy engine. The crippled warship spun away, crashing into its ally, flames blooming like suns. For a moment, Daniel felt a rush of triumph, but then a massive blast struck them head-on. The shield screamed, the ship lurched violently, Daniel thrown against his seat. Pain tore through his body, lights flickered, and died. "Soraya," he shouted. Smoke and sparks surrounded her, but her hands stayed on the controls, her eyes glowing brighter than ever. "I can hold it," she hissed. But not for long. Daniel forced himself back up, ignoring the pain. His hands slammed, the weapon panel again firing blindly into the swarm. 1, 2, 3 more warships burned. But still they came, endless. His breath grew ragged, his vision blurred, but he refused to stop. Then came the worst sound. Silence. The weapon panel dimmed, the ship's hum fell low. Soraya's eyes widened. "We've drained the core," she whispered. Daniel's stomach sank. "You mean we're out of power?" Soraya shook her head. "No. There is one reserve, but it comes at a price." Her hand hovered over a hidden control, her voice soft and heavy. "If I use it, the ship will live. But I may not." Daniel's blood ran cold. "What are you saying?" Soraya looked at him, sorrow in her glowing eyes. "My life force is bound to this ship. I can give it strength, but it will drain me." Daniel shook his head violently. "No, there has to be another way." Her voice broke. "There is not, Daniel. This is the legacy of my family. We gave our lives to our ships, and now it is my turn." The warships closed in, weapons charging. For the final strike, Soraya reached for the control, her face calm but her hands trembling. Daniel's chest burned with anger and fear. He grabbed her wrist, his voice raw. "No, not like this. You can't throw your life away." Soraya's eyes locked on his, glowing with sorrow and something else. "Trust." "Then tell me, Daniel," she whispered. "What choice do we have?" Before he could answer, the ship shook violently, alarms screaming louder than ever. The warships fired, beams of death racing toward them. Time slowed. Daniel's heart thundered in his chest, and in that instant he knew his next choice would decide everything. The beams of enemy fire tore across space, rushing toward Soraya's ship. Daniel's breath caught in his throat, his body frozen, In the cockpit, alarms screamed, sparks burst from the walls, and the cabin shook like a storm-tossed ship. Soraya's hand hovered over the hidden control, her eyes glowing with a strange calm. "If I release my life force," she whispered, "the ship will survive, but I will not." Daniel's chest burned with anger and fear. He slammed his hand against hers, stopping her. "No," he shouted, his voice raw. "You don't get to die. Not like this." Soraya's lips trembled, sorrow in her glowing eyes. "You don't understand, Daniel. This is how my family has always protected our empire. We give our lives to keep the bloodline strong." Her voice broke. "If I fail, everything falls." The enemy fire drew closer. Seconds from striking, Daniel's heart thundered, and for the first time in his life, he felt clarity. "You don't need to face this alone," he said, his voice steady now. "You told me I had to choose, and I have. I'm not letting you die. Not when I can fight with you." Soraya's eyes widened, glowing brighter. Daniel slammed his other hand against the control panel, not knowing what he was doing, only knowing he had to try. The ship pulsed, with light, the symbols reshaping under his touch. The energy core responded to him, binding with his heartbeat, his will. Pain shot through his body, but he held on, refusing to let go. The beam struck. But instead of tearing the ship apart, the vessel blazed with silver light. A shockwave burst outward, scattering the enemy blasts. Soraya gasped, her eyes wide. You connected to the ship." Daniel gritted his teeth, sweat running down his face. "I don't know how, but I'm not letting you be the sacrifice." The ship roared, alive with new strength, its hull glowing brighter than the stars around them. Soraya took her seat beside him, her voice fierce again. "Then we fight together." The warships closed in, weapons firing. But now Soraya and Daniel moved as one. Her hands guided the ship, his will powered its core. Energy surged through the weapons, beams of silver light tearing across the void. One warship exploded in a blaze of fire, then another. Daniel's chest burned, his vision blurred, but he pushed harder. Each shot felt like part of him leaving his body, but he refused to stop. "Daniel!" Soraya shouted, her voice shaking. "You'll burn yourself. If you keep this up." He looked at her, his voice hoarse. "Better me than you." Her eyes softened, filled with something he had never seen before. Not just trust, but something deeper. "You stubborn human," she whispered, but her hands never stopped moving. Together, they turned the tide. The hunters and warships fell one by one, the void filled with fire and debris. At last, silence returned. Only the stars watching. Daniel slumped back in his seat, his chest heaving, his body weak. The ship dimmed. Its glow softening, but it was still alive. Soraya leaned toward him, her hand on his shoulder. "You saved us," she whispered. "You saved me." Daniel tried to smile, though pain clouded his eyes. "Looks like I'm more than a coffee buyer after all." Soraya laughed softly, a sound filled with both relief and sorrow. "You are far more than that," she said. "You are the reason I still breathe." For a long moment, silence filled the cabin. Only the hum of the ship surrounded them. Daniel turned his gaze to the stars, his voice quiet. "So what now?" Soraya's eyes glowed, but her expression grew heavy again. "Now comes the true choice, Daniel. I told you I need an heir, not just to keep my throne, but to unite my people. If I return alone, they will devour me. But if I return with you, with a human beside me, they will tremble." Daniel's chest tightened, the weight of her words pressing down. He had wanted a simple life, unnoticed, forgotten. But now he stood at the edge of something greater. A destiny he never asked for. Soraya's hand touched his, soft and trembling. "I cannot force you, Daniel, but know this, if you walk away I will lose everything. If you stay, you become part of my legacy." Daniel stared at her, at the glow in her eyes, at the strength and fear mingled within. He thought of the café, of that first moment when kindness bound them. He thought of the hunters, the battles, the way she never stopped fighting despite her pain. And then he spoke, his voice steady. "I don't care about thrones or power. But I won't let you face this alone. If I have to be part of your legacy, then I'll be part of it. Soraya's eyes filled with light, tears shimmering like stars. You don't know what this means, she whispered. Daniel squeezed her hand, his voice calm. Then show me. The ship drifted silently, carrying them into the endless stars. But as peace settled, a shadow stirred beyond the void, unseen by them. Another fleet watched from the darkness, far larger than the hunters or warships before. A figure stood at the helm, its voice a low growl. The human has chosen her side, it whispered. Then the war for the galaxy begins.